You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is that time again on a Tuesday, but this time post-NFL trade deadline coming out of week number 9 of the NFL. We're going to take a look back at all the games from this past week, but also diving into some of those big moves that happened as the 4 p.m. Eastern window came to a close for this year's trade window in the NFL. So as always, I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear from you, your thoughts, your opinions on this past weekend's games, but of course, some of the big swings, some of the big deals that happened heading into the NFL's trade deadline. We'll, of course, take a quick look back at last week's rankings here. So if you're looking up on the screen now, as everyone stood going into week number 9, we'll wipe the slate clean, though, taking a look at week number 10, starting at the very bottom and working our way up to the top with the Probably Picks Top 5 category, beginning with the 5 teams that were actually all there last week. So a consistent group, a little bit of changing, but the Titans still sitting at the very bottom of this list, followed by the Jets, the Saints, the Dolphins, and then the Raiders rounding out the category here. Titans, closer affair than I think the Chargers would have liked to have against them. An early Cody Barton pick 6, putting the Chargers behind the 8 ball and then having to claw their way back into the contest as the offensive line continues to kind of fall apart and crumble over there in LA. I'll give the Titans defense some credit for keeping this game close here, but ultimately Justin Herbert just being a little bit too much for this team to deal with as it became all said and done. And the offense, the equivalent of like a flopping fish out of water, unfortunately. And it's a shame because I actually do like Cam Ward, and I think we've seen some flashes of him where there's been enough that I think to myself weekly that if this team was just a little bit better on the offense, you had some more talent on the O-line, some more skill talent to work with, and a coaching staff that's supposed to be there leading the team, and a competent one at that, maybe we'd see a little bit more from Cam Ward than what we've already gotten this year. So I'm looking forward to what the Titans look like down the road, but this is a one-win team that's blessed to even have a singular win so far this season that I also don't think finds very many more wins by the time things are all said and done come week 18 of the season. In front of them is, of course, the Jets, who did not play this week, but had themselves a pretty active week nonetheless as they went ahead and traded Sauce Gardner for a couple of first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell to the Indianapolis Colts, and then trading away Quinnen Williams to the Dallas Cowboys, who could use all the help and then some that they could possibly get on the defensive side of the football there for another first-round selection. The Jets now sitting with 5 first-round selections over the next couple of years, probably looking at finding themselves their next franchise quarterback and ultimately a ton of young pieces to work with to grow with that young incumbent quarterback, whoever that ends up being, whether it's this draft or maybe they're even positioning for the draft following and maybe just starting to build out the team this year. I'll be interested to see where this team goes, but ultimately as they stand right now, 1 win, another team that I don't envision a ton more coming their way, and especially after the sell-off now, this team only got worse. I don't really know if you could say they got better, definitely, but ultimately this is where the Jets are this year, and I'm not really, especially with the rumors that kind of felt like they were swirling around New York coming into this week, I'm not super surprised to see the sell-off. I'm surprised by the names. I definitely thought we'd see some other players move. Did not anticipate Sauce Gardner, who literally 3 months ago signed a whopping 4-year extension off his rookie deal with them to be moved, but unsurprised by an actual sell-off from New York. Saints above them. Things were obviously not great coming into this week here, and the decision to move to Tyler Shuck as your starting quarterback was, of course, kind of a logical step at some point in this season, whether it was this week, last week, following week, whenever it happened. It was obviously going to be a natural progression with him being a second-round selection. But it does not feel like the offense got better, and it honestly kind of feels like it may have gotten worse. I don't know if that's just a combination of where the Saints are as a team and ultimately how good this Rams defense is. I'm not too sure about it, but unfortunately for the Saints here, they're in the same position that the Titans and the Jets are, where I don't envision a ton more wins coming their way. This is a team that needs a lot of work to be done on this roster, and with a defense that also came into this game, who I thought might give the Rams maybe a little bit more of a fight, had literally zero answers for, and I'm watching Saints fans wonder why they haven't moved any pieces away to get more draft capital themselves as the trade deadline approached. Another one-win team with maybe another win or two in the bag at the very best, and it's got to be against another bottom feeder team, in my opinion. Maybe a shocking division rival upset or something that happens in like week 17 or 18 when their opponent is maybe not playing for anything at that stage. Dolphins above them, listen, I can't believe that we're in a position right now where this Dolphins team is moving on from people not named Mike McDaniel. And I understand the camp that is probably arguing that it doesn't really do much or change much to move on from Mike McDaniel at this stage. Like, all you're doing is just hurting the team, I guess, even further, because at least it's Mike McDaniel's offense. It's what he wants going on there. So at least play it out. The change is going to happen regardless. I'm just kind of surprised that's the route that Miami's going for, especially after moving on from their GM. You come into this game and ultimately you're going up against the Baltimore Ravens team that's finally getting itself healthy, and you could not do anything but shoot yourself in the foot early on in this one. Baltimore wins in a fairly dominating fashion, and they probably should have beat you by even more than they did, but they did not. But a blowout loss on Thursday Night Football for a Dolphins team that maybe might find another win or two as the season rolls itself on. One of those teams that there's enough potential in the offense with Devon Achane, with Jalen Waddle, and of course Tua, who, depending on the week, can have a really strong game or throw 3 picks. It just kind of depends on the Tua that you're getting that week, give or take. You probably can find another couple of wins here, but another team that is just kind of swirling at the very bottom of the barrel. And then rounding out the group, of course, the Raiders. And I've got to say, there is something pretty poetic about Pete Carroll being at the goal line, this time around the 2-yard line, and ultimately losing the game at the goal line, throwing the football. The conversation in the office after this game happened was this a situation of Pete Carroll thinking to himself, everyone saw what happened in the Super Bowl. Nobody expects me to not run the football again here. Maybe we get away with something. Ultimately, they go for the pass. Ball doesn't even make it past the line of scrimmage. And I understand wanting to throw in that situation. Jacksonville's defense cannot cover for the life of them, and it is what it is with that Jacksonville defense, and you want to take advantage of that. Brock Bowers is having himself a big game. But ultimately, they are what they are, a bottom team with just 2 wins on the season. They ultimately traded away Jacoby Myers as well to the Jacksonville Jaguars, wildly enough, after, I guess, the Jaguars got a good look at him. So, interestingly enough, they make a trade with the team they just lost to this past weekend, and I'm very curious where this Pete Carroll era goes. I really do, because I really am, because the Geno Smith thing does not seem to be really working, and Pete Carroll's not getting any younger. He's the oldest coach in the NFL as it currently stands. So I'll be curious to see where this all kind of pans out and how it plays out, what the Raiders' plan is at quarterback moving forward, because I know that Geno Smith was supposed to be the answer, and he signed a 3-year extension, if I'm remembering correctly, coming into Las Vegas. So I don't really know if that gets played out at this point anymore, but we'll see. Moving into the Swirling the Toilet category, this is by far the biggest that this category, I think, has ever been. I don't know if I've ever maxed out the group the way I have this week here, but this is a loaded group of teams here, starting with the Giants at the bottom, followed by the Browns, Commanders, Bengals, Cowboys, Cardinals, Falcons, and then rounding out the group, the ascending, I guess you could say, Ravens, now riding a back-to-back win streak here of 2. We start with the Giants. If there's anything positive that you can take away from this season that is just kind of slowly falling into disaster because injuries are just not letting up with this team, at the very least, you can feel like you have found something in Jackson Dart. It was maybe not the world's most impressive performance by any means, but you got another 3 touchdowns out of the rookie. He is the offense at this stage right now, minus a Malik Neighbors, minus, of course, now Cam Scatterbo. The fact that you're still getting big plays out of him, and it feels like he is keeping this team somewhat competitive in some of these games, you can at least feel good about that, despite what is just a kind of epic collapse here. And I'm actually even on record as saying, prior to this season, after drafting Jackson Dart, that if they go into this year and they ultimately turn to their rookie quarterback, and if the Giants can win 4, 5, 6 games, and your rookie quarterback, and this was prior to the Jackson Dart drafting, now being Jackson Dart, we can insert him into that conversation. If Jackson Dart looks good and you're still losing these games because you still need more talent on this team, I'm curious to see if the Giants ultimately move on from Brian Daboll. It feels like that's the direction we're going to ultimately end up at. But Jackson Dart's still performing fairly well, even with the offense being the disaster that it kind of is, or the team as a whole being the disaster that it kind of is. I'll be curious to see how this kind of pans itself out and what happens here. But if there is a bright spot to take away from this season where you're sitting on just two wins at this point in the year going into week 10, it feels like Jackson Dart is the guy, because if he's producing with this team right now, I can only imagine what he could do when Malik Neighbors is back and healthy, when Cam Scatterbo is back and healthy, and when you have even more pieces added to this offense for him to work with. Browns above them, not just Jackson Dart, but the Giants team as a whole. Didn't play this week. Not a ton to say other than they're the Browns and they're swirling the toilet. And the only reason they're not any lower is because the teams below them are struggling just as much, if not more. Commanders, 3-6. Dan Quinn at least came out and admitted that he missed the mark not taking Jayden Daniels out of that game a little bit sooner. And I mean, that seems to be the general consensus amongst just about everybody who watched Daniels' elbow go the other way. This defense has turned into an absolute nightmare, and it does not help that you're also watching players drop like flies as well on the defensive side of the football. Like, it's not just Jayden Daniels. And on the offensive side of things, like aside from the defense getting absolutely torched by Seattle, I'm not really surprised that the offense has been struggling the way it has been, even when Jayden Daniels is in, because he has been kind of in and out of the lineup a lot this season, and there's no consistency with this unit here. You have Marcus Mariota in, you have him out, you have Jayden Daniels in, you have Jayden Daniels out. That's going to affect the team ultimately. So for them to be where they are right now with the season with just 3 wins on the year, it's not really surprising. I gave Washington a little bit more benefit of the doubt going into that game against Seattle, but to watch Seattle kind of run over them the way they did, I didn't really walk away from that game very surprised, because Seattle looks really good right now. Like, they are a legit contender in the NFC, in my opinion. And the way the Commanders have just looked throughout this year, the adversity they have dealt with health across the board right now, I'm not surprised this team is where they are. Bengals above them. Joe Flacco's been unbelievable for Cincinnati. The fact that he's throwing career high in yardage with the tandem of wide receivers he has over there right now currently is a sight to behold at his advanced age. 4 touchdowns, couple of interceptions, though, to go along with it. That is the high-risk, high-reward style of play you're going to get from a Joe Flacco at this stage of in his career. It's just a shame that the defense literally cannot stop a nosebleed. And ultimately, I'm surprised that Trey Hendrickson survived the trade deadline. With the team sitting at just 3 wins on the season, and Trey Hendrickson's on a 1-year essentially rental type of deal that just gave him more money, I would have thought that maybe they'd try to get some sort of capital out of him, especially because I don't envision, and I know the hope is that somehow, some way, this team finds a way to start winning football games and Joe Burrow comes back and sneaks them into the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. You have a team that's scoring 40-plus points and still losing football games. Like, one of the only teams to ever go back-to-back games of scoring over 30-some-odd, I think it's 37, 38 points, whatever it was they scored last week in back-to-back games and lose. Like, it's historically bad stuff. And then you see the comments from, like, Chase Brown post-game calling out the defense. There has got to be some serious internal turmoil within that team, from the locker room to the front office. It's not pretty over there. So I'm surprised that Trey Hendrickson's still sitting around here, because you would have thought that maybe we try to cut our losses in some way, shape, or form if you're the Bengals and get something out of this season. And I think you could get something good for a Trey Hendrickson. But here we are, Bengals 3-6. Joe Flacco throwing the football out of his mind, but the defense literally cannot do anything right. Cowboys above them. I don't really understand how this offense got worse when CeeDee Lamb returned. When you look at the numbers that this offense was putting up while CeeDee Lamb was out and George Pickens was essentially the de facto number 1, they were borderline prolific. Like, if it was the situation of this Cowboys defense is not great, the offense, though, is electric. And the entire time I'm watching this play out, and I'm sure a lot of people were with me on this too, is just wait till CeeDee Lamb gets back. And somehow in the last 2 weeks that CeeDee Lamb's been back in the fold, this offense has looked worse. And I don't really understand that. The defense it's been what it's been. I'm looking forward to seeing what Quinnen Williams adds to this group here. A much needed addition along that defensive line that has not been able to really do a ton for them, whether it's generating pressure, getting after the quarterback, plugging up holes in the run game. They are just not able to really do a whole lot up front. So good addition there. But I mean, if you watch the way that game played out, unfortunately, I know a lot of people were not able to watch Monday Night Football because of that damn YouTube TV versus ESPN thing that's going on right now. And in my personal opinion, and we like to keep it pretty clean on this show, but F both sides of that, because you're both billion-dollar companies, at Google trillion-dollar companies, so figure yourself out, and Disney as well. So don't understand what that's all about. Plenty of places you can go watch the game if you catch my drift. But ultimately, I'm curious to see what Quinnen Williams will add to this defense that is, trying to rival the Cincinnati Bengals right now in who is worse at stopping opponents. Cardinals above them. Obviously, the win was exciting, and I think it's really fun right now as things stand, where Marvin Harrison Jr. is starting to maybe ascend with Jacoby Brissett as his quarterback. And the fact that Arizona has to come out, whether it's, and it doesn't even matter if it's coming from the coaching staff, if it's coming from anybody else, ownership, whoever it's coming from, the fact that it's even coming out in general, the fact that it has to come out that Kyler Murray is still the guy over there in Arizona leads you to believe that there is obviously some internal conversation of, oh my God, this offense kind of looks better with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback than it does with Kyler Murray. Whether that's just a scheme fit thing or just a circumstantial thing, I don't really know. But Jacoby Brissett, for what it's worth, has looked pretty solid playing quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals through 3 games. It hasn't exactly been the best by any means, but it is something that I even felt coming into this game, and am now kind of feeling like maybe I should start doubling down on that conversation. I'm assuming Kyler Murray will be back. He is their guy. I don't really doubt that in any shape or form, but it's kind of funny to me that this offense has looked better the last 3 weeks than it has all season long with Jacoby Brissett under center and all the injuries that they're dealing with. Above them is the Falcons, a team that would be a playoff team if they just had more consistent QB play. At some point, we've got to have the very real conversation of Michael Penix and some of the horrendous throws that he misses that are borderline just like egregious. And you have so much talent to work with over there, from Bijan Robinson, who respect to the Patriots defense, shut him down for the most part because they are pretty damn good against the run. And I honestly thought Bijan might find some success there, but that run defense over there in New England is apparently very, very legit, and that's what I feel like we're starting to learn every week with them. But Drake London single-handedly keeping Atlanta in this football game with the 3 scores he had. And the defense giving Drake May one of the lesser games he's had this season. I mean, got a couple of turnovers off of him. Like, Drake May's been pretty good at protecting the ball all season long. They made Drake May look a little bit more mortal than he has in a while now. So we've got to see more consistent play out of Michael Penix. Simply put, if you get better play from Penix in this game, the Patriots ultimately lose and you come away with a win. I understand a lot of people, it's easy to point to John Parker Romo and the missed extra point, and I get that. Believe me, I do. But you're not in that situation if Michael Penix isn't underthrowing passes, throwing passes into the dirt. Like, there are multiple plays that you can pull out from just this game alone where I'm watching Michael Penix throw and going, who on earth are you throwing that football to? Or how on earth is that football coming out of your hand and landing where it did at that trajectory? It does not make sense. And I don't really understand it, because Michael Penix was awesome in college. And at some point, you're expecting that to start to translate with the development, but you're just not getting it from Penix right now. And you have a good defense to work with. You have all the skill talent to work with offensively. At some point, you got to look at the quarterback here. Ravens above them to round out the category. You come in, Lamar's back. Maybe not necessarily the prettiest game. Like, Baltimore should have ran away with this game by a wider margin than they did. You still got 28-6 W. You still got 4 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson. A defense now that is healthy, that looks like they're going to come in and maybe start running amok on the league. I'm really, really excited to see this Ravens defense start to play now going forward, especially with Lamar back in the fold. But this is where the Ravens needed to be. Coming out of the bye, 2 wins. You got the W over the Bears. You got the W over the Dolphins now. This is where it just needs to keep happening here. The Ravens stand in a position where you have room to lose one, maybe two more games to get yourself in the playoffs. And you have to hope some things swing your way within the division. You could ultimately come away with the division right now. Like the Colts ultimately dropping that game to the Steelers was huge for Pittsburgh's part. Still some ground to make up on, but it's very much doable. But they've got to keep winning here. I think they have a talented enough roster to do so. That's why I have them at the top of the Swirling the Toilet category, because they're in that bowl of a mess right now. But I do think they're very close to maybe grabbing the top of that bowl and pulling themselves out of there. Going into the Jeff Fisher category, really tiny group this week, but we do have some teams in there. I know everyone feels like everyone's slammed into that Swirling the Toilet category, but handful of teams, starting with the Houston Texans with a record that's not very good at 3-5, but we'll get to it in a second. Vikings, followed by the Jaguars, the Panthers, and then the Bears to round out the category. Now, here's the deal. We go back to the Texans, by far worst record in the category here. They're a couple wins away, from being within that 500 club. But I like the trend and trajectory that this team is on. And a large part of it has to do with the defensive side of the football. That is a very well-coached and stout unit over there, and they're shutting teams down. They are the league's best defense in terms of yards per game allowed and points per game allowed right now. Now, the C.J. Stroud concussion injury is definitely concerning and could completely derail this. This is definitely some big projecting, in my personal opinion, about this team. But he played well enough against a Denver Broncos defense that is amongst the best in the NFL themselves. And I do think going up against whoever, if it's the next week, maybe two, however long it takes for C.J. Stroud to clear concussion protocol, because these days it can be a little bit wonky, but usually it's about a week time frame. I think they'll be okay for another game if it has to be Davis Mills. He's a guy that I think does a solid enough job as a backup quarterback in this system, and he's been in Houston for a while now, and I know it's because they appreciate what he brings and how well he knows their system over there. I think they'll be okay, especially because of that defense. If the offense can get a little bit healthier, I think this team's trending in the right direction. I know they're coming off of a tough loss, and it hurts where they are. But this is a team that I think can hang around and is somewhere in the middle of the pack of the league. Like a team slightly better than what their record is actually showing because of the injury bug hurting them in some certain places. But also just a really ugly start to the season that I feel like is starting to change and trend more in the right direction. Like they were this close to coming away with a win over the Denver Broncos, who are very high and well respected amongst a lot of people around the league. So I want to give them some benefit of the doubt here, hence why I have them in this category despite where their record stands. If you think that they should probably be lower, I think there's a fair argument to be made. Record alone is a good enough argument on that. But again, a team that I look at and I go, yeah, it's not great. Record doesn't look good, but I think they're better than what their record is currently showing. Vikings right above them. Wasn't exactly the prettiest game from J.J. McCarthy, but he did secure 3 touchdowns for the team. But I really want to highlight the defense here because there seems to be a little bit of a formula brewing for how you take down the Detroit Lions, and I did not really give the Vikings much of a shot going into this game here, but defense won big, especially on third downs, and for their run defense to look the way they did, coming off a game where they let up north of 200 yards just last week, I did not give them much of a chance. I honestly thought the Lions were going to run wild on them, and for what it's worth, J.J. McCarthy, again, it wasn't the prettiest of games, but he did come away with 3 scores. He put together a solid football game after a lot of people questioning his readiness and just where he exactly stood within the organization as things currently stand. So I got to tip my cap to the Vikings. A Vikings W was just simply not on my bingo card, and I've got to give my respect to everybody. McCarthy, Kevin O'Connell, the defense, Brian Flores, what he's able to do over there. They just got Andrew Van Ginkel back as well, so I really think that defense could start humming as the weeks go on. I like where they stand currently. Let me see more progression from J.J. McCarthy, and I think this Vikings team could be one of those sleeper dark horse playoff teams. Jaguars above them. This team is 5-3, but if I didn't know better, you could tell me they were 3-5, and I believe it. This team is like watching the Jaguars play, I guess I should say, is like pulling teeth. It is ugly. It is not necessarily fun, and it's got to be quite the watch for Jaguars fans, but they're getting wins, and whether you want to point out who those wins are against is totally up to you. They do have some shocking victories, a la a win over the Kansas City Chiefs in prime time. But this defense, man, they just let teams move at will. And in a game where you probably should have put the Raiders away sooner than you did, and even in the overtime situation, you get the go-ahead initial score right out of the gate in overtime. And to let the Raiders drive down the way they did, and ultimately the game coming down to a 2-point attempt on the Raiders' behalf that they ultimately did not convert. Like, that is the story of where this Jaguars defense has been for not only this season, but for at least like a year and a half now, maybe a little bit more than that. So until that defense tightens up, I cannot believe that this team is 5-3. I genuinely cannot. But that goes to show you the parity in this league and the old saying of like any given Sunday or Monday or whatever day these teams are playing on these days. So there has to at least be some respect shown for that. But I just every time I look at the Jaguars record, I cannot believe they are where they are. And that's not, I'm a Colts fan. That's not me being a biased hater by any means. At some point, we have to have the honest conversation of this is quite the ugly 5-3 team. Panthers at 5-4. Carolina's defense might be one of the more underappreciated units in the NFL. I understand that they have some really bad games on tape against both, literally just last week against the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots a few weeks prior to that. But for what they're doing in between those nightmare matchups, they have a shutout over the Falcons where they just completely dominated defensively. Their run defense has looked really good over the last month and a half, maybe a little bit more than that at this point. The season's actually a little bit longer than I'm thinking of, actually. But they've looked good stopping the run. Rico Dowdle, the decision to stick with him as running back one after giving Chuba Hubbard the opportunity last week, I think was a money move for the Panthers. I am still very much out on Bryce Young and what he's doing for this offense, but they're winning football games with good defense and a strong run game. That can get you pretty far. As long as Bryce Young can get back into game manager mode and not cost this team a game, they're going to be flirting with a potential playoff spot, like number 7 seeds sneak into the playoffs, especially coming off a massive win over the Packers where, if I'm remembering correctly, they were double-digit underdogs. So tip my cap to the Panthers on that one, because that's another one of those upsets. I didn't think the Packers were going to completely stomp them out the way I think a lot of people in Vegas expected them to, but I did not expect them to come out with a victory the way they did, and the defense shutting Green Bay down the way they did. Caleb Williams and the Bears sitting at the top of this group, rounding things out. They have been sitting right on the outside of this playoff spot looking in, and they cannot do enough to make me feel like I should slide them up into that next category and maybe knock out one of the other NFC teams. Caleb Williams, though, might throw one of the prettiest balls I've ever seen in the NFL. He throws it like on a rope, and it looks like an absolute laser, and when he's on the run, it somehow looks even better. And that's the craziest thing about it, is he can throw an absolute strike. And when he's on, it's fun to watch. And I mean, you go to the play the play to Colston Loveland to basically win you the football game, like absolute laser beam. And for Colston Loveland to be able to bounce off a couple of guys to race to the end zone and get the W there, like, it's exciting stuff. The defense needs to get healthy. Oh, also, we got to shout out Kyle Monangai for stepping up in that one there, as the running back room is obliterated in Chicago. Defensively, though, secondary also obliterated. They got to get healthy on that side of the ball. You lost Dio Odangbo for the season as well. I believe it's an Achilles injury, if I'm remembering correctly. If it's not Achilles, it's ACL. It's one of those two season-ending injuries, but I believe it was Achilles. If they can just get healthy on defense, 5-3, this is a better team than where they were last year. The buy-in is very clearly there. This offense is really good in Chicago. The defense just has to get healthy. If they can do that, I really like the trend of this Bears team, and I think this is a team, and it shows in the rankings here, very much fighting for a playoff spot. Would not be surprised to see them sneak themselves in. Going into playoff hopefuls and then eventually into that Super Bowl contenders category, reminder, as always, 14 teams, 7 from each conference, a division winner from all 8 divisions, and then 3 wildcard teams from each conference to give you that 14. That being said, we start with the Chargers at the bottom of the playoff hopefuls, followed by the 49ers, Lions, Chiefs, Packers, Steelers, Broncos, and then the Bills rounding out the category here. Chargers at 6-3. I feel like there has been a handful of games this season where I go, You've got the win, but at what cost? And this cost this time around was unfortunately Joe Alt. And at, I believe it was 3:59 p.m. Eastern time, the tweet goes out, and I think it was from Adam Schefter, if I'm remembering correctly, trade with the New Orleans Saints to get them Trevor Penning. So you at least have somewhat of an answer for one of the tackle spots in this offensive line, a very necessary move for a team that, with Justin Herbert playing the way he is, could very well at least compete for a playoff spot. I like that they went and did that. The Oronde Gadsden thing that's going on also over there is just something that we cannot ignore at this point. It really feels like he has turned himself into a legitimate piece to this offense, and one of those, nobody really expected it, but it's happened the last 3 weeks now where he's been a huge contributor on the offense. We've got to start putting respect on his name there. So, and I hope I'm saying his name right. If I'm saying it wrong, please let me know. That my name is literally Ethan Hristodulu, so I understand. Names can be tough. If I'm saying it wrong, feel free to correct me. But this is a team that, with Justin Herbert at the helm, Jim Harbaugh's leading the way, you have a talented receiving room with guys emerging as well. As long as you can stay healthy on that offensive line, my God, they cannot keep losing guys on the O-line. So if they can just stay healthy there, this is a good Chargers team. 49ers above them, this team will go as far as Christian McCaffrey lets them. He is literally carrying this football team on its back. Another 173 total yards, a score on the ground, a score receiving as well. This team will be a 7 seed at worst, and it's going to be because Christian McCaffrey is dragging them to the playoffs. And if somebody deserves MVP consideration, it's got to be Christian McCaffrey at this point. The defense is still all kinds of banged up, and it's only getting worse. It looks like Michael Williams is now done for the season as well. If there is a bright side to the health situation in San Fran, you're at least getting healthier on that side of the ball. There's nothing you can really do about the defense at this point, but you are getting healthier on that side. So there is that plus there. But Christian McCaffrey, man, will not let this 49ers team die. And I got to shout out Mac Jones because he continues to pilot this team to wins. Even if the play isn't necessarily the best by any means, he's leading this team to football wins. Lions above them. As I kind of briefly touched on with the Vikings, there is a very clear formula, and it is just stop the Lions from running the football effectively. If you can do that, you can definitely beat them here. Their bread and butter, and a lot of their offense is predicated off of their ability to run the football effectively. If you can shut them down, it's clear the offense is not built to not be able to run the football. And that seems to be a bit of a glaring issue and something that we'll have to see if Detroit can address as the season moves along. But it's no coincidence now that every single game the Lions have lost, they've not really run the football very effectively. That's literally for every single, the Packers game early in the season, the Chiefs loss that they just had a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, whenever that was, and then ultimately this one against the Vikings as well. You had 4 straight drives in this game that ended in 3 plays. And back-to-back drives. The fourth one ending in a fumble. Ultimately, that puts you in a spot where you basically kind of lost the game on that fumble there. So if we can just see some more consistent ability to run the football from Detroit, I don't really have too much of a concern from them. The defense is fine at this stage. Depending on the game, they're a little bit better or a little bit worse. It's very, very much a little bit of a roller coaster there, but still a good football team, still plenty of talent to work with, fighting for a playoff spot, but it feels like a recipe of how to stop the Lions is starting to pop up, and it's literally just stop them from running the football. It's very easier said than done, very much easier said than done, but stop them from running the ball, and you can come away with a victory. Chiefs right above them. I need to learn. This is me being very open and honest right now. I need to learn to stop believing in the Mahomes magic thing that I think we've been living in the last handful of seasons, because I gave the Chiefs way too much credit going into that game against the Buffalo Bills. It's clear that this team isn't all the way back yet. They have the pieces. They're definitely going to be competing for a playoff spot. I think that they're better than the bottom half of the league, absolutely, and they're still coming away with wins against some of those better teams, but there was definitely a bit of an outmatch situation against the Buffalo Bills. They did not really have any answers for what Josh Allen was able to do, what James Cook was able to do. Dalton Kincaid found himself wide open in some big situations as well. So there's definitely some kinks that need to be worked out within the defense and the offense. Obviously, I definitely think they missed the aggressive run style of Isaiah Pacheco as well. So once he gets back into the fold, maybe you can start feeling a little bit better about this team altogether, but still 5-4, still very much in the mix of things right now. But just, I expected a little bit more out of KC in that game, to be completely honest. Packers above them. Getting in your own way is a really good way to describe this Packers team right now, or at least the Packers' 2 losses this season, I think is the best way to put that. You have 2 turnovers, you got a missed field goal, you had a turnover on downs in the fourth quarter, and the run defense had literally no answers for what Rico Dowdle was doing on the ground, and granted, he's running wild on defenses, so I'm not going to hold that too much against them, because it's 750 yards in 3 games, and I know his number of attempts is ludicrous right now, but the fact that he's 3 games into his season as a starter and he's got well over 700 yards is absolutely crazy. But overall, you shut down Bryce Young. You can't stop the run, though. You can't get out of your way offensively. You're making mistakes. The Jordan Love interception was mind-boggling, to say the least. 2 really ugly wins for a really good team. But you got 5 wins altogether. You have the tie against Dallas, which does not look great at this point because they're 3-5-1 now at this stage, and it's not really getting much prettier for Dallas. Not really sure how I feel about the Packers. I was definitely higher on them than most for quite some time, but this loss kind of shook me from them. Steelers right above them. Crazy turnaround for that defense with all the conversation that everyone's been having about this defense being hit or miss depending on the week. 6 total takeaways. Had to be, I think it was roughly a month since the last time we saw the Pittsburgh Steelers come away with a defensive takeaway, but they came in. Run defense has looked really good for the better part of the last 4 or 5 games or so. They had the really ugly game against Cincinnati where they couldn't stop them on the ground, but for the most part, run defense has been really stout. They've just got to be able to tighten up against the pass. That is probably their biggest issue right now. 300 plus yards allowed in their last 3 games, even including this past weekend as well. So if they can tighten up there, this is a good team. They have all the makings of being a playoff contending type of team. The defense, though, needs to tighten up, needs to be a little bit more consistent. And I mean, the fact that you and even with the offense, too, you want to see more from them as well, because you come away with 6 takeaways in this game, and you're expecting the final score of this game against Indianapolis to be 41 to 21 at best in Indianapolis's case, but you only beat them by a touchdown. Broncos right above them on a day where the defense was always going to win out for both sides of this. I expected that game to be as defensive as it was, and it did not disappoint. I don't remember what my final score prediction for that game was, but it was pretty close to what we ultimately got. I will say this. The offensive inconsistencies do kind of scare me with this team. I will be a little bit lenient in that critique this week because the Houston Texans defense is just so damn good. Again, first in yards per game allowed, first in points per game allowed, as we mentioned when we were talking about Houston earlier. But the fact that their defense could still look so good against C.J. Stroud ultimately until he got taken out of the game, and then they were able to basically shut down Davis Mills for the most part when he had to step in for him. And this is all without Patrick Surtain, goes to tell you just how talented that unit is. We need to get some more out of this offense from a week-to-week basis. The whole waiting until the end of the game to ultimately score to put yourself in the lead and win is at some point, that luck is going to run out for Denver. So hopefully they can get past that sooner rather than later. But that's a championship caliber defense they have over there in Denver, man. It is just so unbelievably good. And nobody has been able to really push them to the limit aside from the Colts and the Giants, I guess, was kind of the one other team that kind of gave them a bit of an issue. But other than that, this has been a pretty strong defense for a vast majority of the season, and defenses ultimately win you championships. If that offense can get on track and get on schedule more consistently, Broncos are a problem in the NFL. And then rounding out the top of this category here, Buffalo Bills with a massive win over their conference rival in the Kansas City Chiefs. You hold Patrick Mahomes to the worst completion percentage of his career. You got to feel pretty good about that, regardless of what you think of this Chiefs offense at this point right now or what you think of Patrick Mahomes. As I mentioned earlier, Dalton Kincaid is continuing to emerge this season, and he's one of those really big bright spots for this offense. It's taken him some time to really come on and find himself in this offense, but it seems like his role is really starting to get carved out, and he is becoming a threat to score at least a touchdown, it feels like, every game, if not every other game within this offense. James Cook continues to run wild, and Josh Allen continues to just gather up more and more evidence as to why he is an MVP caliber player and why he should potentially be a back-to-back MVP winner. So the race continues towards that with Josh Allen leading the way. This Bills team looks really good after that back-to-back losses, between the Falcons and the Patriots games. They've not looked back since the bye week. You get a blowout win over the Panthers. You get a strong win over an AFC team in the Chiefs, who are going to be rivaling you for a spot in the Super Bowl, I would assume, the remainder of this season. Good place to be the Bills right now. Going into the Super Bowl contenders category, we have some shifting. We have a couple new teams actually within the category here. We start with the Patriots at the bottom of this category, and I can't wait to talk about this, followed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Indianapolis Colts, followed by the Rams. You then have the Eagles, and then rounding out the top of this week's rankings, the Seattle Seahawks. Now the Patriots, they ought to send John Parker Romo a thank you card for helping them win this football game here. What I have to say about this Patriots team, and I'm ready to say that this team, in strength of schedule be damned, the conversation surrounding that at some point gets a little bit annoying to listen to because people love to point it out. And yeah, the records are not great against the teams that they're facing going throughout the remainder of this season. Like, you basically have the Bills on your schedule and the Buccaneers next week. But at the end of the day, winning in the NFL is not easy. And Mike Vrabel actually talked about this in an interview that he had this past week, and it really resonated well with me because I'm somebody who's been kind of holding the Patriots back within rankings just because the strength of schedule thing is something that does live in my mind, regardless of whether I totally agree with the sentiment or not. But at some point, you have to respect what they're doing with the sum of parts that they have. This is not the most talented team in the NFL, and they're winning football games. This past week was a prime example of why the Patriots are a good football team, because they made mistakes. They let Atlanta back into the football game. This Patriots team last year loses this football game. They do not win that football game. And for anyone who's saying, oh, strength of schedule this, strength of schedule that, the Patriots are benefiting from it. Sure. Yeah. In a vacuum, yes. At the same time, again, it is not easy to win football games in the NFL. And this roster, not vastly different construction-wise from what it was last year. Definitely some turnover, definitely some new faces. But they had a pretty ugly schedule last year as well because they were a horrendous team the year prior to that on top of it. And they won 4 games, and that was because the Buffalo Bills handed them a victory at the end of the season. So it's very easy to, in a vacuum, isolate strength of schedule and write off why the Patriots are 7-2. But I'm here to defend them. I'm here to bang the table a little bit. I like what the Patriots are doing. They're winning games. If you watch the Patriots each and every single week, very well coached football team. Offense looks really good. Drake May, MVP caliber player right now with the way he's playing. And that was not a great game from him this past week. But I'm here to hold the water of the Patriots and let you all know that this team is legit. Following them, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nothing really to say about them. One of the most quiet teams amongst the teams that did not play this week. They're where they are, a large part because a lot of teams in front of them took a little bit of a tumble down in the rankings going from last week into this week. So they slide back into the Super Bowl contender category, benefiting from some of that. But I still think one of the better teams in the NFL, from the offensive makeup to the defensive makeup, and the way that they have still found ways to win with all the injuries they have, definitely one of those teams near the top of the NFL, in my opinion. Colts above them. I wanted to drop them lower. I really did. And again, Colts fan, first thing I wanted to do, and I've been a very negative Colts fan for the last handful of years. That's putting it probably lightly, too. I wanted to pull the plug on them immediately. That game was a disaster. Absolute disaster. It's a miracle they didn't lose by more, though, and I think that's something that is worth putting into perspective for this Colts team. Is you come away with 6 total turnovers. Daniel Jones had 5 of them, and that is something that in the back of my mind, as a Colts fan, extremely worried about, because there's a good chance that was the pumpkin moment for Daniel Jones, and this whole thing goes to hell. However, outside of that, the vast majority of this season, the team has looked strong. The offensive line has looked like one of the best in the NFL. The Steelers, however, made them look like one of the worst. It felt like they had never seen a defense quite like the Pittsburgh Steelers ever in their lives, individually for all 5 of those offensive linemen. You look at the 18 pressures and the 5 sacks they allowed. I can't believe it wasn't more, because it felt like more watching that game play out. Couldn't get a lot going with the run game either, so I was really surprised. This was very much like, in terms of what the Colts have put on tape, very much an anomaly type of game, but I've got to give them credit for only losing by the score that they lost by. They could have absolutely, like I said earlier, lost this game like 41-21 and that been that. But they hung in there and they kept it close to the end. Now, going out and trading for Sauce Gardner probably saved them a little bit in the rankings. That is one of those, again, projection type of things, but I think bringing in Sauce Gardner is going to be huge for this secondary because, yes, they went out, they got Cam Byron this offseason. They also went and got Charvarius Ward, but I did still think they needed another piece within that defense in the secondary specifically, and Sauce Gardner is definitely that guy. You can point to the one interception he's had since 2022. Teams don't like throwing him the football. He is not somebody you want to challenge against. I'll be curious to see if maybe a change of scenery on a team that is not the hellhole, the New York Jets, maybe it's a little bit of a boost in morale and a little bit more ambition and a little bit more really wanting to be that number one cornerback in the NFL that a lot of people thought he was emerging into a couple of seasons ago. I still think he's a top guy, and I think coming into Indy is going to be a huge plus for him and a huge plus for this team overall. So I probably wanted to put the Colts a little bit lower here than I have them as it currently stands, but they helped themselves out with that move for Sauce Gardner, and I'm really excited to see where this team goes. Rams above them, simply rolling, just absolutely rolling right now. Offensively, defensively, Matthew Stafford is on a hell of a run right now this season, sitting on 21 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. He's thrown at least 3 touchdowns or more in 4 of his last 5 games. And the defense, such a beautiful compliment to what they're doing over there. Their pass rush is literally second only to Denver, who has like insane numbers right now. So one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. The secondary is a young and feisty unit. And then Puka Nacua, who is undeniable and inevitable, as long as he is healthy and on that football field, is going to make what feels like 2 or 3 wow type of plays a game, has just become that number one guy that Matthew Stafford loves to feed the football to. This team could go very, very far this season. And that says a lot coming from me in the sense that going into this season, I was very worried about this Rams team, the health of Matthew Stafford, and what this team could potentially look like because I wasn't necessarily sold on the secondary coming this year as well. So for me, being a team that I had as like a fringe playoff team, looking at them the way I am now, this is a legitimate team because I had a lot of doubts about them in my eyes coming into the season. Above them is, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles. Did not play this season, but a team that is in a really good spot. They kept A.J. Brown. They went out and added to the pass rush. I love giving up a third-round pick for Jalen Phillips because he's someone that when he's healthy and on the football field, he can be a factor. And this is a pass rush that lost a lot of guys this past offseason, and it was something that I was concerned about coming into this year, and it's been a bit of a problem. Bringing in now Jalen Phillips. You also got Brandon Graham, who came back as well. This could be a strong unit going forward. I'm really excited to see that integration for him into this defense and into that pass rush overall and how things start to shape out, especially on the edges in like the run too and sealing out the edges. This could be a big pickup for this team. I'm kind of surprised Miami gave up on Phillips. I understand the injuries and whatnot and keeping him out of action for as much time as he's missed to this point, but I thought maybe with him being able to stay healthy this season so far to this stage, maybe wanting to be able to, at least see what you could get out of him for one more year in Miami, but it seems like they're getting closer to hitting the reset button than anything else, especially after the firing of the GM. So like hindsight 2020, it makes more sense, but I like this Eagles team, man. They're really starting to figure it out in the passing game. The running game is still a little bit of a work in progress. There's, the chirping of the run game's too obvious. This offense is too predictable and all that. I understand that's all there, but this team's still 6-2 for a reason. They are uber talented, and I think in the last couple of weeks with the additions they've had, they've only gotten better, and I'm excited to see this Eagles team post-bye week in the back half of their season. And then, of course, to round it all out, at the number 1 spot, the Seattle Seahawks. Absolute dominance from the offense to the defense to everything in between. This Seahawks team came out swinging on Sunday Night Football on this Commanders team. It was like almost like shark smells the blood in the water, and they just went at Washington. And really unfortunate that Jaden Daniels went down in this game, but they basically completely eliminated Jaden Daniels up to that point and him as an X factor. Sam Darnold is he's playing unbelievably. And I was one of the people that came into the season going, this was a mistake from Seattle's part. How is that O-line going to protect him? It's not been good. O-line continues to really impress. Sam Darnold went 16 of 16 in this game. He's playing like an MVP, and I'm ready to stand on this hill and shout this out to the ether, and whoever wants to respond to it, by all means, feel free. Jackson Smith-Njigba is playing like the best wide receiver in the NFL right now, and it's not really close. Like, I know a lot of people like to look at Justin Jefferson. They like to look at Jamar Chase and go, those are the guys, 1A, 1B, or Justin Jefferson's 1, Jamar Chase is 2, vice versa. However you want to flip-flop that, I'm sorry, but the way that Jackson Smith-Njigba is playing and just absolutely dominating every single team every single week, and the gap that he has created statistically between himself and every other receiver in the NFL right now, it's kind of out of control. And at this point right now, JSN is number one. It's not really close. Say what you want about everybody else. It's not really close. I think he has taken quite a step this season, and he is in that conversation. I know historically speaking, you look at the numbers from Jamar and Justin Jefferson. I get it. But at some point, you got to look at the present and the now, and JSN right now looks like that guy, and he's helping lead this push that Seattle's on right now. So give me the Seahawks at the top of the NFL to wrap up week number 9 as we head into the double digits of the NFL season with week number 10 coming up. But those are my rankings going into week 10. As always, you made it to the end. I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow to preview Thursday Night Football action. So until next time, have a good one.